Well, I see we have quite a few people that have already joined, which is very exciting. I want to say thank you for joining us on the Impact of Leadership Leading Forward webinar series as we kick off today. We are very excited to have our speaker, Jack Uldrich, who I'll get into a bio in just a second, but his focus today of the topic is reimagining the post-crisis world. So a couple things. The moderators today is going to be Steve Shear, our Vice President of Sales, along with myself doing the kickoff right now. So a few things about CCB in case you have never heard of us. We have been around 29 years. The leadership side of things is something we've started about a year ago, but what we've been doing for the other 28 years has been IT solutions and services, meaning that if you ever need your product ordered from an IT company, we're that supplier for you. We also do managed services, help desk, cloud security, mobility solutions, along with procurement, as I just said. You can find all the different solutions and offerings at ccbtechnology.com. Again, we are here for you as you continue to guide and lead your business during this crazy time. So what is the impact of leadership? Well, this was a podcast that came out of a year ago when Steve and I were talking about how important leadership is. Steve became a new vice president of sales, and he realized how much he needed to learn from others. And as we've been talking and strategizing, we realized I need this as well, attended a couple conferences, read some books, and just realized, what if we started putting out content that could really help other businesses? And we just said, let's go for it. And that's what we've been doing for the last year. So if you would like to learn and participate in our podcast, you can. You just have to go to the CCB Technology website, go to the very top, look for podcast, and that's where you can subscribe. So let's talk about Jack, our guest speaker. I'll give you a little bit of insights on who he is. Jack is a leading futuristic author and speaker who helps organizations gain foresight so they can create a successful future. He's an author of 11 books, wow, and a contributor for the Wall Street Journal, the Business Week, and is a regular guest on CNBC, MSNBC, and CNN. His work is based on freeing yourself from obsolete knowledge and assumptions in order to survive and thrive in an era of unparalleled change. Though no one can predict the future, Jack is here to help us prepare for it. Welcome, Jack.
All right, thanks, Patrick. So the title of my presentation is The Great Reset, the Emerging Age of Reimagination, Renewal, and Reconnection. But I really love this picture. It is from Switzerland, and the government of Switzerland is now projecting the heart up onto the side of the Matterhorn. And so to start this presentation, because we're virtual, I've only done this once, but what I want to ask you to do is put your hand on your heart. And I want you to push down on it a couple of times. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, I really hope to make an impression on your heart. The next is leaders, in order to get us through this great reset, you're going to need to resuscitate your heart. And then you're going to need to connect your heart to your mind. And speaking of minds, as a futurist, I want to show you I have the ability to read your mind. What I want you to do in this little exercise is I want you to select one single card. It can either be the King of Hearts, the Jack of Clubs, the King of Spades, Queen of Diamonds, Queen of Clubs, or the Jack of Diamonds. And I want you to write it down. And I don't care if you're in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Miami, or Mumbai. I am going to select your card. And if you're with someone, don't share it with the other person. I'm now going to reset these cards, but I'm just going to take your card away. And I know I took it away. I'm not going to tell you how that trick worked, but what you need to understand, we're already living it, is I reset the deck somehow. And of course, our world has been reset. This is one of the iconic images of the pandemic. A good fraternity brother of mine, Doug Hagerman, is the chairman of the board of the Milwaukee Symphony and Orchestra. And I love these pictures. I mean, if an orchestra can reset and play beautiful music and connect with their community, all of us can begin resetting, and we can begin reimagining a better, more beautiful future. So I want to go back to that trick. I'm not going to explain it to you, but now what I want you to do in this little exercise is there's something blatantly wrong with this card. And it should be obvious to most people, but it takes most people a minute to figure it out. And what it is it's a spade. So it should be black, but in this case, it is red. And I'm here to tell you, the rules have changed. If any of you think we are going to go back to business as unusual, you need to disabuse yourself of that idea. The rules of the world have changed. And I love this quote from Peter Drucker. I mean, when the rules change, the one thing we can't do, we can't act with yesterday's logic. So this creates a lot of uncertainty in people. And I suspect you're feeling a lot of uncertainty. The first thing you need to do as a leader to begin resetting yourself is you're going to have to get comfortable embracing ambiguity and paradox. And let me set it up this way. What word does that say? Well, of course, it says true. But viewed from a different perspective, it can be false. And as we go out into this great reset, you're going to have to get comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. And let me put this in a more concrete, specific way. The two Chinese characters for the word crisis actually represent danger and opportunity. I think we all know the danger. I'm not going to speak about the danger that we're all under. What I want to speak about is the opportunity. And there is an incredible amount of opportunity. One of the things that you need to understand about the Great Reset is this is in fact accelerating a lot of the change that was already happening. The world was already being reset before the pandemic, but now it's being accelerated. But there's opportunity in this. Elon Musk and others are going to continue to launch satellites into space. And within the next couple of years, those satellites are going to blanket the entire globe. We're going to be able to deliver high-speed internet access to all 8 billion people on the planet. To understand how transformative this is, only 4 billion people have access to the internet today. So what is the opportunity? Well, here's the way we always view the world. But let me show you a completely legitimate other way to view the world. The only reason we don't view the world's maps this way is the world's first cartographers were from Europe, and they put Europe and thus North America on top. The future is going to come from the millions, hundreds of millions of people in South Africa, in India, in Indonesia, and in Africa. There's a world of opportunity for business, but we have to begin seeing the world differently. But as I said, we're already experiencing a reset, that the world is changing fast, and it was changing fast before the pandemic. We all know that in the last couple of months, the future of work, remote working has been accelerated. Online education has been accelerated. But those aren't the only things that have been accelerated. Autonomous vehicles are now taking off in a number of cities. Grocers are saying, look, in this new era where people have to maintain social distance, are there new ways for us to deliver groceries? And there are, and companies are experimenting with drones and robotic vehicles. But what else is happening? 3D printing is continuing to be accelerated. As the global supply chain has been shut down over in China, we're going to begin 3D printing things right in our home communities. But that's not the only thing we're going to be printing. We're printing shoes down in Austin, Texas. They're even 3D printing houses, which is absolutely remarkable. I think one of the things about this crisis is it has really demonstrated to everyone the gross inequality that exists in America and the world. There are a lot of people who are homeless, who don't have housing, who are at risk of losing their housing. Can we begin reimagining a world where there is better, more affordable housing? Of course we are, but we're going to have to reconnect with our imagination. But what else is accelerating? Well, digital cash is accelerating. Amazon is still going to move out and create cashierless stores, which I actually think are going to take on because people don't want to interact with as many people in this new world and in the post-COVID world. But what else is happening that should be viewed as an opportunity? I don't know what's going to happen out in Washington, D.C., but I hope that the Republicans and the Democrats, if they can agree on one thing, it is that we need to accelerate 5G. And we need to do that for rural America. Right now, if you live in a rural part of Wisconsin or Minnesota or anywhere in the country or the world, you can't do remote working. You can't do telemedicine. You don't have the same opportunities. But if we can begin deploying 5G antennas and satellites, the opportunity in rural America is going to be extraordinary. And so if you're a business leader, we're not there yet, What I need you to do is to start imagining all of the possibilities that might come to fruition as we deploy many of these technologies. So the next thing you need to do as a leader in this reset world is you need to learn how to reframe things. Let me just give you one specific example. This is one of my favorite examples. I'm going to ask you, what do you see in that picture? I want you to think of it, and then I want you to write it down. If you are from America, if you're from the West, what you say is you see a tiger in a jungle. Fair enough. But if you're from Asia, what you say is you see, well, I see a jungle with a tiger in it. You see the difference? In the West, we see the individual first and the big picture second. In the East, they tend to see the big picture first, the community, and the individual second. How is the world being reset? Here's how it's being reset. Before the pandemic, I think most people would have looked at an individual like that wearing a mask as being, oh, he's quite selfish, or he's worried about his health. But that's not what's happening anymore. This is a heroic act. He's actually thinking about the community first. He's thinking about all of these other people. And as we go through this great reset, one of the things we all have to do as business leaders, stop focusing on ourselves and start looking at the bigger community. And so what I would encourage you to do is, instead of thinking of your business first and it then operating in a community, think of your community first and how does your business support that community. The businesses that do that, I think, are going to be the ones that thrive in the future. And let me just give you another example. If you can't do that, one of the other things as a business you can do is you can begin creating your own community. This little company is called Instapot. They're out of Ottawa, Canada. And they've created a community where people are now sharing recipes that you can make in that pot. But they've also said, hey, what other designs do you want on the pot? And to show you how fast they're moving, a couple of their customers said, hey, I want something specifically for Mother's Day. And I thought this was clever. So they're creating a sense of community. How can you leverage technology to begin creating a sense of community with your customers? Don't focus on your business, focus on your customers and the type of community they want to be a part of. Here's another great example. In order to focus on your community, you have to begin listening better. 10 years ago, Lego was on the verge of bankruptcy, but they said, we need to start doing something different. And so what did they do? They started listening to their customers. They put their customers first. And once they did that, you know who they discovered their customers were? It was adults, it was teenagers, but it was also women. And these are some astronaut Lego communities, but they have really driven business by creating a community. And I think one of the opportunities in this great reset, you can begin connecting with your community and create community, you're going to do just fine. This is going to require reimagination. I actually think imagination is one of the most atrophied and underused muscles in our mind. But here's the beauty of what's happening in this great reset. Things that we couldn't even imagine a couple of months ago, we've now seen with our own eyes. This is the picture of New Delhi. The picture on your left, October 2019. Picture on your right, April of this year. Blue skies. Here's one of the bizarre things about this pandemic is more lives are going to be saved because of it. 1 million individuals in India, China, places like Los Angeles were dying every year because of lung-related issues. And our economic system simply accepted that as the cost of doing business. But I'm here to tell you, billions of people have now not only reimagined the future, they've seen it with their own eyes, they've tasted it, they've smelled it, and we are not going to go back. And there are beautiful opportunities in all of this. But I'm here to tell you, you need to use your imagination. One of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, and we think he's all about his mind, I love this quote. He said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And in this time of the Great Reset, imagination is more important than knowledge. And let me just give you a couple of historical examples of imagination and reimagination. We're in a crisis, without a doubt. Some people say we're going into another Great Depression. But if you go back and study the Great Depression, it's remarkable how many of really successful businesses that still exist today were started at the height of the Depression. Disney is the most famous example. But let's go to the Great Recession of just 10 years ago. Think about the companies that came out of that. Uber, Airbnb, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of them were reimagining a different world. But you might think, well, that doesn't really apply to me. How else can you use your imagination to reimagine problems into opportunities? This is one of my favorite examples. I actually like to drink Guinness. And if you know anything about a Guinness, a properly poured Guinness takes a couple of minutes for the foam to settle. Well, about 15 years ago, Guinness discovered younger people whose patience was thin just didn't have time to wait for that. So they were ordering things other than Guinness, and sales were beginning to plummet. And so the leaders at Guinness got together and said, well, what can we do? And they talked to the brewmasters and they said, well, we could tweak the formula, but if we did that, it wouldn't be Guinness anymore. But it was someone in the marketing department who just reimagined the world. And they said, look, we don't have to change anything. Let's just create a new marketing slogan. And if you might remember, the marketing slogan 10 years ago was, good things come to those who wait. They just reframed and flipped a problem and turned it into an opportunity. And as a leader in this crisis, you're going to need to take time and begin thinking hard about how you can reframe your problems and turn them into opportunities. Let me give you another example of how you can reimagine the future. As a futurist, I have one piece of advice for you. If your idea about the future doesn't sound crazy, you're not reimagining hard enough. 2 years ago, I was out at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, and Amazon was just partnering with Kohler, the Wisconsin-based manufacturer of toilets, and they'd created a new smart toilet. And pardon the puns here, but a lot of people poo-pooed the idea. Other people said, that's a crappy idea. But all it did is it flushed itself without you having to touch it. Well, now suddenly in this COVID world, the idea of not having to touch a toilet appeals to a lot more people. But here is where things are going to get crazy. That's not where it's going to end. I don't have proof of this, but I think what Kohler and Amazon are working on is they're going to leverage existing technologies, and they're going to start putting sensors into those toilets. And those toilets are going to be connected to the cloud. And I'm here to tell you, when you and I do our business, there are biomarkers in our urine, in our stool, and Kohler and Amazon are going to make that toilet, and they're going to use it to leverage to get into preventative healthcare. They're going to want to know, or you're going to want to know, if you have COVID, you want to know that as quickly as possible. And if that toilet can help detect it, great. If it can help detect the flu, if it can help detect cancer, they're going to begin leveraging that device to get into preventative healthcare. You need to begin thinking about how you can leverage all of these technological tools to reimagine your world. It's a great opportunity, but again, if I have a piece of advice, if your idea doesn't sound crazy, you're not thinking hard enough. If it sounds plausible, I'm here to tell you there are a dozen other people who are already thinking about it. Let me give you another example of reframing and reimagining. This is Miller Park in Milwaukee. I don't think 40, 50,000 people are going to be coming to baseball games anytime soon. And you'd think that that's a huge problem for the people who operate that stadium. And it is a problem, but where's the opportunity? Well, before that, before this crisis, the operators of stadiums could not figure out how to make money out of smaller events. But now, if the Violent Femmes, one of my favorite Milwaukee-based bands, happens to play, might 10,000 people go to Miller Park and watch the concert in a socially acceptable, distanced way? Yeah. I mean, wherever there's a problem, there are going to be opportunities, but you're going to have to think differently about all of this. What's the next thing you need to do? You need to both re-inspire yourself and your employees. And I'm actually going to start with yourself as leaders. There's a famous Latin phrase, it's called memento mori, and it means remember your death. Now this sounds depressing, but if you really want to inspire yourself, you need to think about the end. What do you really want to do on this planet? I love this idea that thinking about your death is actually the passport to a better life. In business, we always say, oh, keep the end in mind. You want to make a difference in this world? Keep the ultimate end in mind. What do you really want to do on this planet? How do you want to use your business to both make a better business, make a livelihood for yourself, for your employees, but ultimately make your community and the world a better place? If you can get in touch with that, again, the world is going to open up to you. Let me give you a practical way to how you might want to begin doing this. And I just came across this example this week. It's not my idea, but I want you after this to make a list of your top 25 priorities in life. What do you really want to do? And then I want you to circle the top 5. Easy enough. But then those other 20, those become your avoid at all cost things. You have to, in order to live your best life, you're going to have to give up some good things. And I think one of the mistakes we all make, and I make it, is to think we can do all 25 of these things. We have to make some difficult choices. But if we can do that, and we can focus on the best, well, then we can re-inspire ourselves. And if we're re-inspired, I think we can re-inspire our companies. So now let me go to the last one. Oh, I do want to go back. I know this whole idea of inspiration is a difficult one, but let me just give you a simple way to do that. We all have big problems to do this. One of the best questions out there is this, what's the smallest step you can take today towards your big goal? Too often we focus on the big goal and we think, it's just impossible. But if we just focus on the first, smallest, easiest step, we can begin building some momentum. So whatever your problem is, what's the smallest step you can take today? Just figure that out and just keep doing it day after day. But now I want to go to how do we recreate a more beautiful future? And it's this. Here's how I want you to think about how we can create a better, bolder, more beautiful future. All of us have been asked a version of this question ever since we entered kindergarten. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to answer this question in your mind. How creative are you? I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds. Just write down. I'm not going to call anyone. But you know what? It's a crappy question. Here's what I now want you to do. Using those exact same 4 words, how do you craft a better question? I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. Just use those existing 4 words and make a better question. Because the question of the future isn't how creative are you? It is how are you creative? Each and every one of us is creative. And because we are creative, each and every one of us has a role to play in this future. But if you want to create this more beautiful future, you're going to have to reconnect with your heart. If you can reconnect your heart to your mind, you're going to be able to begin reimagining and reframing and re-inspiring people. You get in touch with your heart, you're going to be able to reconnect with your purpose and with your community. You do those things, and the Great Reset turns from a problem and a crisis into an extraordinary opportunity. So I really appreciate you bearing with me through this short presentation, and now I'm really looking forward to taking some of your questions.
Jack, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And just to direct your attention, those of you that on the webinar, as Tim put in the chat there, if you go to the Q&A on the bottom of your screen, you can actually submit questions there. And so first one that I've got for you, Jack, has to do with meetings. And you can take this to meetings or meetings and brainstorming. So those of us in business, it feels like our lives are consumed with meetings. How can we take some of the principles that you just talked about and apply those, to the meetings and to the brainstorming sessions now, looking at the next coming weeks and maybe transitioning back and the new normal and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think one of the incredible opportunities with these new meetings and using Zoom, and I think a lot of us are going through fatigue, but a few years ago I read a wonderful book, and it was called The Power of the Introvert. And if you haven't heard it, it's by Susan Cain. Close to 50% of all people are introverts, but introverts don't feel comfortable speaking up in physical meetings. But I think one of the beauties of this new environment is voices that we weren't being heard prior to this suddenly are being heard. They might not want to speak out, but they're comfortable typing their questions. We're tapping into expertise that was always around us, but we simply weren't aware of it because the old paradigm said you have to have the courage to speak up. But I think this new world is giving people, some people are simply more comfortable speaking up from a camera. They're more comfortable typing. So the question then becomes, how do we leverage both in this post world? I think that, of course, there's going to be a need for human connection, being able to read people's body language and their face. But there are also a lot of really good things. And so again, here's where I would encourage you to embrace ambiguity. Is let's just recognize the positive aspects of this technology while also being realistic as to its faults. But the combination of the two, I think, is going to help take us all to a higher level.
That's good. And the word that you use there, ambiguity, I use that pretty frequently. And Patrick actually he makes fun of me pretty regularly for using that word, but it's good. It's a great reframing of that, not to be coy with what you spoke about before. But a couple other questions, zooming in a little bit more on industries. So you got small and medium-sized businesses, and then going back to restaurants. So we're people that like to gather and community and that kind of thing. Your take on restaurants, and how do you think that's going to change, going forward?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, let's be candid. The world, if you're in the restaurant industry, it's going to be difficult. That the rules have changed. When your restaurant is able to open, my guess is only 40 or 50% of the crowd is going to be able to be allowed in. The state health departments, I think, will mandate that, and it's going to be difficult to making money. But here's where you need to begin thinking differently. In my area of Minneapolis, about 10 years ago, food trucks started popping up. And in the past, if you had a food truck, your ultimate goal was to open a restaurant. Well, now in this new world, flip it on its head to say, yeah, you can still have a physical presence, but can you now begin leveraging mobile technology and create a food truck and begin delivering your meals out to your community? Could you partner with 5 other food trucks and say, look, we're going to try and I'll cover South Milwaukee on Monday, but on Tuesday I'll do a different part of the city, and then you with your Mexican restaurant or you with your Indian mobile truck, you come and deliver to a different area. What are the new opportunities for partnership? How can we think differently about all of this? And I don't know how all of this is going to turn out, but during this great reset, another piece of advice, we're all going to have to get a lot more comfortable with experimentation. And here's a little bit of ambiguity for you, Patrick. Patrick, stop giving Steve a hard time. You got to embrace ambiguity. The riskiest thing to do is to play it safe in this new world. The safest thing to do is begin taking some risks. That's sort of a mind flip on you, but you have to embrace some ambiguity.
That's good. That's good. There's this next one's kind of a weight. Well, I don't know if they're all weighty, but bear with me as I read it off because I want to get it right. So practically speaking, when you think about an innovative culture, how is it that business leaders or people that even without authoritative titles, those of us that are coming up, what are some things that authoritative title people can do to help create and cultivate an innovative culture? And what are some things that people without authoritative titles can do to help cultivate and create innovative cultures within their organizations?
Outstanding question. Here's the first thing: as a leader, you can begin creating a culture of innovation. And it's this, I'm going to sum it up for you in 7 words. Give up on answers, stick with questions. The leaders of the future don't have the answers, and they have the honesty and the candor and the humility to say, we don't have the answer. But you know what our responsibility is? Ask a better question. And they create a culture of all of their employees say, help us ask the best question possible. If we can't get to the best, let's at least ask a better question. But in terms of engaging everyone, I've been saying this for years. Everyone in your organization, in their job title, from the lowest position all the way up to the highest, should have creativity in the job description somewhere. It is everyone's responsibility to be creative. And if you give people that, suddenly they find meaning in their work. Where are some of the greatest innovations of this pandemic coming from? It's coming from frontline workers. People who in the past we said, oh, they're just a clerk or they're just stocking shelves. Well, yeah, you know what? They're also human beings and they have minds and they're creative and they want to do the right thing. But if you put that in their job description and say, I expect all of you to be innovative, I think you'll be amazed at what comes out of it. We tend to think, oh, innovation is something the smart people do or the scientists do or the people who are familiar with technology. Yeah, they all have a role, but so does the administrative assistant, the people who are on the front line with the customers. So give up on answers, stick with questions, and put creativity in everyone's job title.
So good. So good. I was about to jump in and ask a question that popped into my own head, but trying to stick to the plan here. A question came in from David. So what do you think, or what's your opinion on what will happen to the commercial real estate industry and potentially what new technologies could affect that or replace it?
Yeah, I'm going to be candid here. The world of commercial real estate, they are in a difficult situation. And I think the first thing, as a futurist, I am optimistic, but I'm also realistic in the short term. I think the first thing commercial real estate has to do is they simply have to survive right now. And then they can begin looking at reviving themselves, but ultimately long term, how do they thrive? And here's where I would encourage commercial real estate to begin reimagining the world. And maybe the first thing commercial real estate needs to do is drop commercial. There's going to be a lot of excess space. Again, we know that affordable housing is this huge issue in cities all around the world. So could some of those commercial properties be renovated into affordable housing? Yeah, I think that is possible. I think they're also going to have to look at entirely different business models. And as I think about innovation, I always say to people, I think the biggest innovation is going to come from thinking about your business model. And are there going to be new ways of sharing space? That would be one. The other thing I would encourage them to do is begin leveraging, and I know this is difficult, but they're going to have to make some investment in the future. And if I could go back to commercial real estate, again, the riskiest thing to do is to play it safe, is to just try and batten down and ride out this storm. You're not going to make it if you do that. You're going to have to make some strategic investments. The mistake most businesses make, they overinvest in what was. I need commercial real estate to begin investing in what could be. I mean, is there a way to begin leveraging investments in renewable energy to drive down your energy costs? Yeah, I think there is. Is there a way to leverage the Internet of Things to begin making your space as efficient as possible? Yeah, I think there are, but you're going to have to reimagine and you're going to have to make some reinvestments in this future. And again, I think it's easier for me to say that not being in the industry. I don't know people's bottom line, but you're going to have to make some investments in these troubling times.
Good, thank you. Another question came in from our friends in education. So how do you see higher education shifting as a result of the pandemic for, like a university perspective, but I suppose it could be all the way down to, grade school, but from a university perspective, where do you see the greatest opportunities as well? So I like the balance of this question, education shifting because of the pandemic and then also greatest opportunities.
Yeah, earlier I said that the pandemic was accelerating trends that were already underfoot. Online education was getting better, and the world of higher education was simply operating on the system that they've operated on for the last 150 years. But now many students are now questioning themselves as they no longer can go to the campus to say, why am I taking an economics course from a mediocre professor when I could take an economics course from the world's best at a different college? That the world is changing. But last summer, I had the opportunity to come out and work with Marquette University, based right in Milwaukee. Wonderful university, wonderful president, and really innovative. And one of the things I said to them is, we need to begin rethinking higher education. And we need to disabuse ourselves of this idea that higher education is just sort of a 4-year period. We are now moving into a world where it's cliche, but it is real. Lifelong learning is real. And the idea that we can somehow educate anyone for just 4 years and then they're done. The opportunity for Marquette, other universities, is begin connecting with your community and say, you know what? We are going to help you continue to educate yourself through your entire life. What are the new business models there? A subscription to a Marquette University or the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee to say, for a small fee, you have access to all of our professors, our classrooms throughout your entire life. That once you're an alumni, you are a lifelong learner of our institution. Not only does that help them survive, it embeds them in the community. And they then begin having deeper relationships with companies like CCB. So Patrick could go to a Marquette and say, look, we need more people in cybersecurity. Help, let's start doing this. But to go back to higher education, the other thing that is happening in this new world is, as you think about reskilling, we always think about skills as being coding or technology or very specific, tangible skills. The skills of the future are going to be curiosity, creativity, empathy, imagination, wisdom, and I would argue even love. They're the softest skills, but those are the things that absolutely cannot be replaced by technology. And I think our universities have to begin thinking about what are the courses in empathy and imagination and creativity and wisdom. I think it's a huge opportunity if they're willing to move out in that direction.
Mm-hmm. So I am going to jump in with one of my own questions while I have you here. It has to do with creativity. How would you encourage us to engage our kids, young folks, and then ourselves to really get this thing going with cultivating creativity and love and empathy and those kind of things you just spoke about?
Yeah, great question. And I want to put in the plug for the podcast we're going to be doing next week, Steve, because I love your questions. And my co-author is going to be on the call as well. But in terms of creativity, I wish I would have discovered this earlier. My two kids are now 19 and 21. And when they first started coming home from school, when they were in kindergarten, first grade, like every parent, I said, oh, what did you learn today? And typical the response was, especially from my son, nothing. I'm like, well, that's not working. And so I then flipped it when they got a little older, and I said, what questions did you ask at school today? And I love that reframing of it, because what it does is it says to your child, first, you know what, the teacher doesn't have all of the answers. And if you can continue to ask questions, you're going to stay curious. And if you can stay curious, you're going to be more creative. So if I have any advice as a parent, and believe me, I'm not the world's best parent, it would be that is when your kids come home, ask them what questions did they ask. In terms of empathy, I'm going to go old school here. I love reading and I love novels, but the beauty of novels is you're able to put yourself in a different person's shoes. And by virtue of doing that, I think you're beginning to create an empathy muscle. You begin to see that your perspective on the world is not the only perspective on the world. And so I would encourage, especially during this time when everyone's staying at home, by all means, let your kids, watch Netflix and binge a couple of shows, but at some point, turn that off and encourage them to read. The third point is there's an emerging trend. It's known as forest bathing. Get out in Mother Nature. If you want to increase your creativity, a walk in Mother Nature does wonders. Not only does your blood pressure go down, your creativity increases. So I think if you can do those three simple things, you're going to be well on your way towards preparing your children for the skills that they need to thrive in the future.
So good. I think we might have one more question here before we start to wrap up from Katie. How do you see the future of journalism as traditional news sources are no longer necessarily viable business models? Like, what do you see trending there for the future of journalism?
That's another good question. Let me be honest. This is not an area that I have focused on. I should quite clearly, but I would say the future of journalism goes back to this idea of community. And we are all interconnected. And I think we're now beginning to see that. We're interconnected on a global level, but we're also much more closely connected with the people who are delivering our food, who are stocking our shelves, who are caring for our mothers in the nursing homes and other things like that. And so I've kind of lost my train of thought here, but I think we have to, the journalists, the opportunity for journalism is to begin focusing on community and building community. At the end of the day, we are social beings and we want to be connected. And what is the opportunity for journalists and journalisms to show our interconnectedness? I think if journalism can begin doing that, that there's going to be a space for that. And I say there's going to be a space for that because people are going to be craving that. And that is, in fact, going to be integral to creating healthy, vibrant communities. And even on the global level, global journalism has to begin showing our interconnectedness.
It's good. Well, thank you, Jack. I wish we had, well, we will have next week. We're going to do a podcast. Well, I'll ask you a whole bunch more questions next week. So we have a couple more slides here, and then we'll close this thing down. Thank you so much, Jack. That was awesome. As Jack alluded to, the podcast, we've got about 60 episodes that are currently available. Last year, I was able to sit down with Jack and talk about the future of business, and that was episode 21. Next week, he alluded to it. We're going to sit down with his co-author, and we're going to ask a whole bunch more questions coming into this new phase of life for the entire world. As a reminder to what Patrick spoke about at the beginning of the of this session here, the impact of leadership, the idea is about bringing value. So we have those 60 episodes spanning all kinds of different topics. You can consume this at that website there, anywhere you can get your podcast, whatever platform you prefer. But I want to bring it back to value. We want to bring value to you. We want to give you accessible and engaging and fun leadership skills. And one of the other webinars that we have going on right now is around Microsoft Teams, because we do believe that there's two sides to every house when it comes to an organization, whether it's the leadership side and the IT side. Those are the two things that we influence at CCV. So Microsoft Teams is huge. This webinar series has been very, very popular. If you are interested or you have someone at your organization that oversees IT, they might be interested as well. That's the URL there that you can register for free, in-depth look at Teams. And I think we've got maybe 2 more slides here. Oh, there we go. So if you have feedback, this is the conclusion here. You can reach out to myself or Patrick. Before we log off, I just want to say for the podcast, every episode, I do a takeaway and an action item when I interview people because there's so much content. So I want to give you very quickly my takeaway and action item. And it's not going to do justice to this whole talk, but for the takeaway, we have an opportunity. Don't waste the pandemic. The world's not going to pause to let you reinvent how you do business, how you parent. Right now is an opportunity, and Jack has been very, very helpful in illuminating that. The action item, maybe listen back to this, but ask more questions. If your questions aren't crazy enough, you're not thinking hard enough. Thank you for being a part of this. Our contact information is there. We're very active on LinkedIn. We want to serve you well. We appreciate you being here. We hope you can join us next week for Derek Gaunt.